They said they trusted me, handed me a bottle of wine, a smile, and the house keys. But what they really left behind were hidden cameras watching my every move. At first I thought I was just being paranoid, until I saw the tiny red light blinking from the ceiling. Margaret Allen had always been the kind of woman people overlooked in the grocery store line, or passed by on park benches without a second glance, but not because she was forgettable. No, Maggie possessed a quiet gravity, the kind that pulled people in only when they took the time to notice. She was 67 years old with silver-streaked hair she twisted into a bun every morning like clockwork. Her voice was soft, her posture upright, and her eyes, the sharpest thing about her, held 1,000 stories. In a past life, she'd been the head librarian of a tiny public library in Fremont, Ohio, a town where Friday night football games were gospel and the local diner still served meatloaf the way they did in the 60s. Maggie had loved that life. Not for its glamour, there was none, but for its rhythm, its gentleness. For decades, she'd been the keeper of returned books, the whisperer of overdue notices, the person who knew which child needed a mystery novel and which retiree preferred historical fiction. Her hands had shelved thousands of stories, but none had ever prepared her for the one she was about to live. When her husband Richard passed away 5 winters ago, it was as if the lights dimmed inside her. He'd been her only love, a carpenter, with hands like weathered leather and a heart like warm bread. They met in college, got married in a church with cracked, stained glass, and never once considered divorce, even when money was tight and tempers flared. They were old school, steady, and deeply intertwined. After his sudden heart attack in their driveway, just minutes after clearing the snow for her car, Maggie learned what it truly meant to be alone. Not just physically, but spiritually. The kind of aloneness that echoed. She stayed in their small home longer than most thought she would. Friends from the book club suggested assisted living. Her neighbor Denise offered to set her up with a widower who liked crossword puzzles. Maggie always smiled, politely declined, and went back to her tea and Emily Dickinson poems. Then one October morning, the phone rang. It was Ryan, her only son. He lived in Seattle, now a tech project manager, with a corporate beard and an apartment full of devices Maggie didn't understand. "Mom," he began, voice upbeat in that performative way people use when they're about to ask something big. "Courtney and I have been talking. We really don't like the idea of you being alone out there. It's not right. You've given so much your whole life, and we think it's time you let us give something back. Why don't you come live with us?" Maggie blinked at the mug in her hand. The steam rising from her tea curled like question marks in the air. "Live with you," she repeated, more out of habit than confusion. "Yeah. We've got the guest room. It's barely used. And Courtney would love it. She thinks it'd be great for us to all be under one roof. You know, like family's supposed to be." That word "supposed" tugged at her. A week later, Courtney called too. Her voice was sweet, high-pitched, practiced. "It just makes sense, Maggie. You'll love Seattle. Fresh air farmers markets. We even have a community garden down the block. It'll be like a fresh chapter." Maggie didn't respond right away. That night she pulled out the old tin box where she kept Richard's letters from their courtship. She reread one where he said, "Wherever you are, Maggie, that's home for me." She cried, not because of the letter, but because it no longer held true. The next morning she said yes. 2 weeks later, she stood at the edge of her old driveway, 4 boxes and a suitcase at her feet, and watched a moving truck pull away with what was left of her life. Her neighbors waved. Denise handed her a jar of homemade jam, and someone said, "You'll be back for the holidays, right?" Maggie smiled and said, of course, knowing deep down she wouldn't. Seattle greeted her with gray skies and cold drizzle. Ryan picked her up at the airport in a sleek electric car that buzzed like a phone on silent. He hugged her tight, tight enough to mean something, But the moment passed quickly as he swiped at notifications on his smartwatch. "You're gonna love the place," he said. "We just had it remodeled. Super efficient. You won't believe the kitchen." Maggie nodded her coat, still damp from the rain. Courtney opened the front door before they even knocked, holding a glass of green juice and wearing an expression that screamed photo-ready hospitality. "Welcome home, Maggie," she said, with that dazzling Instagrammable smile. The house was gorgeous, cold but gorgeous, open concept everything, hardwood floors that echoed underfoot granite countertops that looked untouched, and a living room with furniture that didn't seem designed for actual sitting. Maggie's new room was upstairs, neatly made, filled with neutrals, and featured a smart TV she didn't know how to turn on. "There's a voice assistant by the bed," Courtney explained. "Just say what you need. Lights, music, whatever. It's all connected." Maggie smiled and thanked her, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. That first night, Maggie lay awake for hours staring at the ceiling. No cricket songs, no wind rustling the maple trees outside. Just silence. A thick humming silence, interrupted only by the occasional beep from some device she hadn't located yet. She told herself it would get better. It always got better with time. The days passed in a polite, calculated routine. Maggie made breakfast. Courtney reblended hers into smoothies. Maggie offered to help fold laundry, only to be met with an awkward, "Oh, we send that out now." Ryan was present but distant, his eyes always on a screen. Maggie found herself shrinking a little more each day, careful not to interfere, not to overstep, not to exist too loudly. One afternoon, she baked banana bread the way Ryan used to love it when he was a boy. She left it on the counter with a note from Mom's oven with love. No one said anything. The bread was gone by morning. No mention, no thank you, not even a casual. It was good. Maggie began taking longer walks around the block, staring at houses and wondering if their kitchens felt more real than hers. It wasn't unkindness. It was something colder detachment, like she was an ornament placed for display. One night during dinner, Courtney casually announced, "So, Ryan and I are taking that trip to Maui after all. We leave Friday." Maggie paused mid-bite. "Oh, that's wonderful. I'll miss you both." "You'll have the house to yourself," Ryan said. "Think of it like a staycation. Totally relaxing. No stress." Courtney added, "We trust you, of course. You'll be fine. Everything's automated anyway. Just ask the system if you need anything." They handed her a bottle of red wine, that night Pinot Noir, her favorite, and told her to enjoy herself. Maggie smiled and nodded and waved as they drove off in their Tesla 2 days later. But as she stood alone in the doorway, bottle in hand, a strange chill ran down her spine. Something in the house shifted when they left. Something subtle. It wasn't just the quiet. It was the kind of quiet that felt too still, the kind that made the hair on your arms rise. Maggie turned off the lights one by one that evening and went to bed early. She told herself it was just the new environment, just her nerves. But as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, her eyes caught a glimmer, a faint red blink from the corner of the ceiling barely visible. And for the first time since Richard died, Maggie felt truly unsafe. Not because she was alone, but because something told her she wasn't. The house was too quiet. Maggie had lived alone before 5 years in Fremont after Richard passed, but this silence felt different. It wasn't the peace of a familiar home resting after dinner. It was a hollow, clinical stillness, like the kind found in empty hotel rooms and hospital corridors. Maggie told herself it was just the adjustment. New walls, new city, new everything. But deep down, she knew the feeling wasn't just loneliness. It was a presence, and not the comforting kind. She woke the first morning alone to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the robotic voice of the thermostat announcing the temperature. 72 degrees, it said cheerfully. "Have a pleasant day." Maggie smiled faintly, murmuring thanks to no one in particular, and poured herself a cup of coffee. The light streaming in through the wide glass doors was soft, golden, and absolutely still. She tried to follow a routine. Old habits from Ohio clung to her like favorite sweaters, making the bed precisely, folding towels into thirds, reading the newspaper in full. She walked around the neighborhood, watered Courtney's planters, and reorganized the spice rack just to feel useful. But every time she entered the living room or turned a corner, she felt something. At first it was just a prickle like static on her skin. Maggie would pause in the hallway, glance over her shoulder, then shake her head at herself. "You're being silly," she'd whisper, chuckling under her breath. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it sharpened, like someone watching just behind the wall, not threatening, exactly just there, not seen, but felt. She stopped humming to herself by the third day. There was no reason to it. Felt like her voice bounced back at her, echoed. She caught herself standing still in the middle of the kitchen, forgetting what she came in for. When she reached for a snack one afternoon, she hesitated, aware of how quiet the act of crinkling a bag had become. It was the kind of silence that demanded stillness, that punished noise. Late one night, as she was brushing her teeth, something caught her eye in the bathroom mirror. A faint red flicker, barely noticeable. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the corners of the ceiling. There just a blink, then nothing. The light was gone. Maggie leaned in, peering closely, but saw nothing but drywall and shadow. It was probably a reflection from her electric toothbrush, or maybe from the nightlight in the hall. Still, she slept with the door closed that night for the first time since moving in. The next day, she tried to ignore the growing tension in her chest. She distracted herself by cleaning the oven, refolding laundry, and trimming the dead leaves off Courtney's precious fiddle leaf fig. Still, by evening, she couldn't shake the image of that blinking light. She stood in the center of the living room, looking up. The ceiling was high, flat, flawless, but something felt off about the corner by the bookshelf. Maggie fetched the small step stool from the laundry room and climbed carefully. Her knees weren't what they used to be, but her instincts were sharper than ever. She ran her hand along the edge of the molding, then paused. A small circular indentation, smooth, cold. She stepped down slowly, her mind racing. She didn't say anything out loud, not even to herself. Just made a pot of tea and sat in the breakfast nook, staring out the window. The garden outside looked like a photograph, immaculate, curated, too perfect. That night she dreamed of walls that watched. By the end of the week, Maggie found herself avoiding certain areas of the house. The hallway upstairs, the kitchen table. She kept to her room more than usual, not because she wanted to, but because she could breathe easier there, or at least she thought she could. A few times she tested it. She'd say something mundane out loud, something about the weather or a recipe she wanted to try, and wait. Nothing ever happened. But the stillness after those words, it felt like the silence after a dropped glass, like someone was listening just out of frame. Then came the moment she couldn't explain away. It was Sunday morning. She was sitting at the kitchen island, flipping through a crossword puzzle in the newspaper, when she dropped her pen. It rolled across the floor beneath the lower cabinets. Maggie got down on one knee, reaching to retrieve it, and froze. Tucked beneath the cabinet lip, nearly flush with the baseboard, was a tiny black square. A lens. It was unmistakable. She sat back, slowly holding the pen but not using it. The paper sat forgotten. Her tea cooled beside her. So, it was real. Not paranoia, not nerves. Real. Someone, Courtney, Ryan, or both, had placed a camera in the kitchen, pointed at the exact spot she spent most mornings. Maggie looked around the room slowly. How many more were they in the hall? The living room, her bedroom, her breath caught. the bathroom. She didn't move for a full minute, just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the blood pounding in her ears. Then, with the slow precision of a woman who had spent her life categorizing order from chaos, she stood up. She didn't tear the place apart. She didn't call Ryan. She didn't even cry. Instead, she walked to the front room and sat down in the armchair near the window, the one that faced outward. She stared at the driveway, the road, the tidy bushes outside that swayed in the breeze. The world outside was moving, normal, alive. And inside this house, someone was recording her. Maggie didn't know why. Not yet. She didn't know how many cameras, or for how long, or who watched the footage. But she knew one thing. She wasn't supposed to find out. And now that she had the silence made perfect sense. Maggie waited until nightfall. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew timing mattered. If someone was watching, they'd expect her to behave a certain way. The cameras, she was certain there were more, weren't just there to record. They were there to monitor her habits, her movements, her mind. So she acted as she always did. She brushed her teeth, folded the throw blanket over the couch, made a cup of chamomile tea she didn't drink. Then just after 11 p.m., she turned off the lights and went to bed. Only she didn't sleep. She waited. At 2:14 a.m., Maggie stepped out of her room and crept upstairs, her steps silent on the soft carpet. The door to Ryan's office had always been slightly ajar. Tonight she pushed it open all the way. She'd never entered before. Not out of fear, but respect. But whatever trust once existed had dissolved the moment she saw that black lens beneath the kitchen counter. The room was neat, unnaturally so. A single desk, a wide monitor, and a locked file cabinet in the corner. The kind of space that looked lived in, but not personal. There were no framed photos, no books, just function. She sat at the desk, moved the mouse. The screen blinked to life. No password. That more than anything chilled her. The sheer confidence of it, or maybe negligence, or maybe a game. The desktop background was an aerial view of Maui, blue water, sand, peace. Maggie's jaw clenched. There were 6 folders on the desktop. One was labeled Logs, another Archives. She clicked Archives. A long list of video files opened, dozens, all labeled by date. Each entry had timestamps. Some lasted 3 minutes. Others were over an hour long. She clicked the most recent one. It took a few seconds to buffer, and then her own face filled the screen. She was sitting at the breakfast nook, humming softly, stirring tea. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. The audio was clear enough to hear the spoon tap the mug. She clicked another. She was in the living room, this time fluffing pillows. The angle was high, probably from a light fixture. Another video, her brushing her hair in the bathroom mirror. Maggie's hand shook. The videos weren't just casual recordings. They were observant, focused, chosen. She opened another folder, Live Feed. The screen split into 9 panels, every room in the house. The guest room, kitchen, living room, even the hallway near the bathroom. One of them was black. Her heart skipped. That was her room. She clicked a small camera icon, and suddenly the image returned, dim, lighting the shape of her unmade bed. Still, the feed was active. She stared at it for a long time. Just stared. They were watching her. Right now. Then she noticed a final folder minimized and blinking. It was called Clips. Courtney. Maggie hesitated only a moment before opening it. Inside were short videos. All had been clipped from the surveillance footage. Many had file names like Funny Mom Kitchen or Boomer Gets Lost Living Room. One video caught her eye, Live Call, C. She double-clicked. It was a screen recording. Courtney was on a video call with someone, a young woman in her 30s with brightly dyed hair and an iced coffee in hand. Courtney was laughing. "Oh my God," she said through giggles, she still thinks she's alone. She talks to herself constantly, like full-on conversations. I should start charging admission. The other woman chuckled. Court, that's insane. She doesn't know about the cameras. Courtney leaned back, sipping wine. No clue. I mean, Ryan feels bad sometimes. But come on, it's not like she's doing anything private. She just exists. The other woman raised an eyebrow. That's kind of messed up. Courtney shrugged. It's like a real-life documentary. When old people move in. She burst out laughing again. Honestly, I just think of it as data. Behavioral study. You'd be surprised how many views some of the clips get on private forums. Maggie felt her stomach flip. Private forums. She paused the video, her breath tight. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. A part of her wanted to keep watching, maybe even confront it all at once, but something deeper, older stopped her. No, not yet. She needed more than shock. She needed proof. Maggie minimized the window, opened a notepad app, and began typing. She documented every file name, every folder, every clip. She took photos with her phone, screen after screen, timestamp after timestamp. She recorded her own video, flipping the camera to speak directly. My name is Margaret Allen. She began, her voice steady. I am 67 years old. My son Ryan and his wife Courtney invited me to live in their home. I have discovered surveillance equipment in every room of the house. I was not informed. I did not consent. This is a record of what I have found. She showed the screen, pointed out the folders, then turned the camera to her face again. I don't know why they did this. I don't know if they ever cared about me, but I will not let this go. She stopped recording, saved the file, and backed it up to the cloud. Then she placed the mouse back where it had been, adjusted the chair, and silently left the room. Back in her bedroom, she sat on the bed, phone in hand, her heart still racing, but not from fear anymore. She felt something else now. Clarity. For the first time since arriving in Seattle, Maggie knew exactly what she was dealing with. They had made her feel like a guest in her own family, like a prop, a joke. But Maggie Allen had not survived widowhood, small-town scrutiny, or 6 decades of life just to be reduced to a voyeur's pastime. No, they didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Maggie had always believed in preparation over confrontation. She wasn't impulsive. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam doors or speak in ultimatums. That wasn't who she was, but she was not passive. Never had been. When something was broken, she fixed it. When something was stolen, she remembered. And now something sacred had been taken from her, her privacy, her dignity, and the last scraps of trust she had in her son and daughter-in-law. So she got to work. It started with one quiet morning and a yellow legal pad. She sat at the kitchen table right under one of their cameras and began to write. Not a diary entry, not an emotional outpouring. A list, methodical, cold, numbered. 1. Number of confirmed cameras, 7. 2. Location of each kitchen, vent, living room, corner hallway, light fixture, guest room, closet, trim bathroom, vent, front entry lamp, laundry shelf. 3. Folder structure on Ryan's computer archives. Date, individual clips. 4. Live call, file video of Courtney mocking me. 5. Behavioral evidence of distribution, reference to private forums by name. She stopped only to refill her tea. By 10 a.m., she had filled 3 pages complete with Times field names and direct quotes from the footage she had reviewed. Not one detail was out of place. Next, she pulled out her phone and took photos of everything, screenshots of the computer stills of the camera feeds, even the folder labeled Boomer Moments. She opened a private email account and uploaded it all to a secure drive, backing it up twice. Once to the cloud, once to a password-protected USB drive she kept hidden beneath the bathroom sink. It wasn't just about knowing the truth now. It was about proving it. She didn't just want an apology. She wanted accountability. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She called Tom Richards, Tom had been more than a friend. He and Richard had played college football together. Tom was now a well-respected family lawyer in Chicago, someone who'd always signed his holiday cards with "your friend" always, and he meant it. When Tom picked up the phone, he sounded surprised. "Maggie, well, I'll be damned." "To what do I owe the pleasure I need your help, Tom?" she said plainly. His tone changed instantly. "What's going on? I'm being recorded without my consent, in every room of this house, by my son and his wife." There was a long pause. "Then tell me everything, from the beginning." And she did. She told him about the cameras, the videos, the mockery. She kept her voice level, her words measured, but Tom could hear the steel underneath. When she finished, there was silence on the line again. "You've got them cold," he said finally. "But we need to make sure this is handled properly. Maggie, are you safe?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Good. Then listen carefully. Don't confront them. Not yet. Don't let on you know. The second they know you know, everything changes. They could wipe the data, hide the evidence. We're going to do this by the book. I understand. You said you contributed to the house $50,000 3 years ago. I didn't ask for anything in writing. It was for Ryan, but I still have the bank transfer record." Tom's voice brightened. "That helps. In family law, contributions like that, especially to real property, can carry weight. You have leverage." She didn't smile. "Not yet." He continued. "Here's what I need. Scan every document. Upload everything you found. I'll review it tonight and draw up a letter of legal intent. This won't be a full lawsuit yet, but it'll send a message. Maggie, we're going to make this right. Thank you, Tom." He hesitated a moment. "You're not alone in this, Maggie. And you're not invisible. Never think that again." She hung up and felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, no, not yet, but direction, power. The rest of the day she prepared silently. She packed a small overnight bag, just the essentials. Not as an escape, but as insurance, just in case things went sideways. Then she drafted a statement. Not a rant, a record. "To whom it may concern, I, Margaret Allen, have reason to believe that I was recorded without knowledge or consent during my stay at the residence of Ryan Allen and Courtney Brooks Allen. I possess evidence of surveillance devices, as well as video and audio files containing private activity and conversations. These recordings were collected without disclosure, and at least one party involved has referred to sharing such material via third-party platforms. I have consulted legal representation and am prepared to pursue all lawful avenues available." She printed 3 copies, one for herself, one for Tom, one for them. But she didn't leave it out. Not yet. That night, Maggie turned off every light in the house and sat in complete darkness. Let them watch her silhouette. Let them wonder what she knew. She stared directly at the blinking light in the guest room ceiling and said nothing. Let them fear the silence for once. In the morning, she made pancakes, just like she used to when Ryan was 8. She poured his favorite syrup, placed a fork at the table. All a show, all a trap. She let the cameras record the mother they thought they could humiliate. Let them. She had already won, because the truth was no longer theirs to hoard. It was hers to wield. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of cloudy Seattle morning that carried a chill through the windows, no matter how tightly they were sealed. Maggie sat alone in the kitchen, sipping coffee slowly, her suitcase already packed and hidden behind the guest room closet door. She had waited long enough. Ryan and Courtney's flight landed at 6:32 a.m. By 7:45, she heard the familiar click of the Tesla's automatic locks and the soft thud of luggage wheels against the porch. "Mom, we're back." Courtney's voice rang through the foyer, bright and artificial, still tasting of hotel mimosas. Maggie didn't answer immediately. She finished her sip of coffee, set the mug down carefully, and walked out to the living room with the kind of deliberate grace that made time slow. Ryan appeared behind Courtney wearing sunglasses and a tired smile. How was everything while we were gone? Maggie didn't respond with words. She simply gestured to the dining table where 3 sheets of paper were laid out neatly under the morning light. One bore the legal summary Tom had drafted. Another was a printed copy of her bank transfer to Ryan. The third, her handwritten letter. Courtney's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Maggie stepped forward, voice even. "This is me taking my name back." Courtney picked up the letter, scanned the lines, her expression changing with every sentence. Ryan leaned over her shoulder, his smile fading fast. "I know about the cameras," Maggie said, not raising her voice, not blinking. "All of them." Silence. The air thickened. Courtney blinked rapidly. "Excuse me, I know about the kitchen, the hallway, the bathroom." Maggie paused. "I know about the live feeds, the saved clips. I know what you said about me, Courtney." Ryan looked up sharply. "What did she called me a living documentary, a behavioral study." She laughed with her friend about the footage. "You both watched me like a lab rat in a controlled habitat." Maggie's gaze pierced through them. "You didn't invite me here to live with you. You invited me to perform." Courtney's scuffed arms folding tight across her chest. "Okay, that's completely out of context. I saw the video. That shut her up." Ryan looked pale. "Mom, I didn't. Courtney set up some of the devices, but I didn't know it went that far." Maggie cut him off. "You didn't stop it either." The silence that followed was brutal, raw. Then Maggie reached into her cardigan pocket and placed a USB drive on the table. "This is a copy of the surveillance footage, the folder structures, your conversations, everything I've backed up to a secure location. This drive doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm not the one on defense anymore." Courtney's voice rose brittle. "You've been spying on us," Maggie actually laughed once. Quiet, bitter. "You installed a camera above my bed, Courtney. You spied on me." Courtney's mouth opened, but no words came out. Ryan sat down hard in one of the dining chairs, hands running through his hair. "What do you want?" "Finally." Maggie said it. "I want back the $50,000 I gave you for this house. I want a full written admission that surveillance was conducted without my knowledge or consent. And I want every device removed within 24 hours. After that, I decide whether this stays in civil court or goes criminal." Courtney slammed her hand on the table. "You think you can just walk in and make demands like some lawyer?" Maggie stared at her. "No, I didn't walk in. I was invited. I trusted you. And you recorded my grief, my habits, my breath. You violated more than my space. You violated my humanity." Courtney turned to Ryan, flustered. "Are you really going to let her do this? Just cave in." Ryan looked at his mother. Something in his expression shifted, not fear, not guilt, but the recognition of someone he hadn't seen in a long time. Not the old woman in slippers, not the harmless widow with a tea mug. His mother, the one who raised him, who taught him how to stand up. And now stood against him. He exhaled. "We'll pay you back, and we'll get rid of the cameras." Courtney's jaw dropped. Ryan, he didn't look at her. It was wrong. Courtney stormed out of the room. Maggie stood still, letting the silence reclaim the space. Then she placed a manila envelope on the table. Inside are instructions for the transfer, and a copy of the legal letter from my attorney. "You have until noon tomorrow." Ryan looked up, eyes soft. "Where will you go?" She smiled faintly. "Somewhere I'm not watched." Then she picked up her suitcase and walked to the front door. As she turned the knob, she heard Courtney shout from upstairs, "You'll regret this, Maggie. You're nothing without us." Maggie didn't turn back. She just said quietly, "Then you never knew me at all." And she walked out. The cottage was small, not cramped, but intentionally humble. tucked beneath the blue-green ridges of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Asheville, North Carolina. It had once been a writer's retreat, a place where poets came to remember how to be quiet. Maggie had found it through a listing on an old friend's Facebook post. A friend from her librarian days, someone who had once given her a recipe for strawberry preserves and a book on how to start over. It had hardwood floors, soft yellow walls, and a back porch that opened onto a stretch of wild, uncut grass and white flowering trees. No cameras, no artificial voices, just birdsong wind through screened doors and the occasional creak of old wood stretching in the afternoon sun. It was perfect. She moved in 2 weeks after leaving Seattle. Ryan had wired the $50,000 back to her account within 24 hours, just like he promised. He didn't say much, didn't write a note, but the transaction spoke louder than words. It was a form of surrender. Courtney didn't reach out. Maggie didn't expect her to. Tom handled everything else, his voice steady and firm on the phone, walking her through each step of the formal non-disclosure, the agreement to delete all digital content, and the threat of legal escalation if one frame ever resurfaced. Maggie signed with a steady hand. It wasn't revenge she wanted, it was distance. Clean lines, a boundary drawn in ink and upheld by law. She was done with being seen. Now she wanted to see herself. The first week in Asheville, Maggie did nothing but breathe. She walked barefoot on the cool wood floors. She let the wind dry her laundry on a line she'd strung between 2 trees. She lit candles. She read books by the fire and let silence fall around her like a wool shawl warm-earned. Then one afternoon she wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. On linen paper with her favorite fountain pen, she wrote it to herself. Dear Maggie, you are not invisible. Not now. Not ever again. You have survived love loss, humiliation, and betrayal. You have walked through fire and come out clean. And more than anything, you have not forgotten how to be kind, even when the world forgot how to be kind to you. She folded it carefully and placed it in a wooden box beside her bed. Each morning after that, she wrote another. Some were only 3 lines, some stretched across pages. Some were full of dreams, some full of memories. Some simply read, "You're still here. That's enough." Maggie began gardening again. Nothing ambitious, just herbs, tomatoes, a few unruly sunflowers that leaned toward the porch, as if reaching for conversation. She started attending a local book club hosted at a nearby library by a woman named Evelyn, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and always smelled like cinnamon. The women welcomed her like one of their own. No one asked about her son. No one asked why she came. They just passed her warm muffins and folded her name into the circle. And slowly Maggie began to tell parts of her story, not all at once, not with bitterness, but with grace. She would say things like, "I used to think my quiet was a burden, but I've come to see it as my strength. Or being alone doesn't mean being empty." One afternoon, Evelyn pulled her aside after the meeting and said, "You should write these down, Maggie, all of it." Maggie blinked. "You think anyone would want to read it?" Evelyn smiled. "I think a lot of women are waiting to hear someone say the truth out loud." And so she wrote. Not for fame, not for attention, but for clarity. For the countless women like her who had handed over pieces of themselves for the illusion of family, of safety, of being needed. She wrote the first draft in a month. She called it Still Watching, a Story of Silent Surveillance and Starting Over. She submitted it to a small publisher recommended by the local bookstore owner. 3 weeks later, they wrote back with a contract and a note that read, "This isn't just a story, it's a mirror, and a warning, and a torch." The book launched quietly, but spread steadily past from hand to hand, woman to woman, daughter to mother. Maggie never toured. She didn't appear on podcasts, but she did answer every letter that came in. every handwritten message that said, "This could have been me," or "Thank you for showing me I can walk away too." Maggie never saw Ryan again, not in person. He sent one letter months later, just a single page. "Mom, I was wrong. I was too blind to see it then, but I see it now. What we did, what I allowed, it wasn't just disrespectful, it was dehumanizing. I don't deserve your forgiveness and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know you taught me more by leaving than you ever did by staying. I hope you're happy. Truly. Ryan." She read it once, folded it and placed it in the same box as her own letters. Forgiveness wasn't a door she needed to open today. Maybe not ever. But acknowledgement that mattered. On the 1-year anniversary of her move, Maggie hosted a tea party on her porch. She invited the women from her book club, the bookstore owner, the post woman, and the neighbor who helped fix her garden fence after a storm. They drank from mismatched porcelain cups and laughed about things that didn't need to be recorded. Things that only mattered because they were fleeting, real. As the sun dipped behind the hills and the air turned soft and lavender, Maggie stood and raised her cup. "I want to thank you," she said. "Not just for showing up, but for reminding me that showing up is enough. That being seen, really seen, means choosing who gets to witness your life, not who demands it." There were tears, but not sad ones. Later that night, Maggie sat on the porch alone, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked up at the stars, uncaptured, unfiltered, entirely her own. No lenses, no judgment, no audience, just her. And at that moment, for the first time in a very long time, Maggie Allen wasn't performing, wasn't proving, wasn't defending. She was living, freely, fully. Months after Maggie left, the house in Seattle began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but like rot beneath fresh paint. The silence became heavier without her. The kitchen felt colder. Courtney stopped baking. Ryan stopped laughing. They tried to fill the spaces with smart lights and streaming playlists, but something had shifted, something they couldn't name. Courtney lost 2 clients after a scandal leaked about surveillance ethics. No one could prove where it started, but the whispers were loud enough to matter. Ryan, once a rising star in his company, failed his leadership review. He never said why, but the HR report cited integrity concerns. One night, Ryan sat alone at the dining room table, staring at the iris-shaped glass paperweight Maggie had left behind. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away. The house still worked. The cameras were gone, but the home was broken. Courtney moved out the following spring, said she needed a reset. Ryan didn't argue, and as he stood alone in the same foyer where his mother had once smiled, suitcase in hand, he whispered the words, "Too late, I should have protected her." But empty houses don't answer back. Remember, when you treat love like a transaction and family like a commodity, don't be surprised when the home you built forgets how to hold you. The cameras may stop recording, but some mistakes replay forever. If you were Maggie, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent to keep the peace? Or would you have walked away to reclaim your dignity? Have you ever been made to feel small in your own family, like your trust was used against you? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters. If Maggie's journey touched you, if it made you angry, if it made you feel seen, click that like button to show the world these stories deserve to be told. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't just a story. It's a reminder you are not invisible, and we'll keep saying that one story at a time.